just about all of us, we spend years on LinkedIn with nothing but press releases and job announcements. But for some of us, there comes a point where the world's most boring social media network falls away. And suddenly you find yourself somewhere else. You find yourself in Linky Land. And welcome to episode 2 of the podcast. I am Tony Albrecht, your host. They have not relieved me of duty yet, so let's roll today. Thank you to everybody who has downloaded or listened to the first episode. It's been really lovely to get some interaction on it and to find that some of y'all enjoyed the conversation I had with Sam Brown and Mathilde Bernard Funderburk. If you haven't listened to that one, you know where to find it. It's on the feeds. Today's episode, well, maybe I should take a step back and remind you, or chances are this is your first time ever hearing this. In Linky Land is a podcast about the power of creating and connecting on LinkedIn. And I am nothing more than a man who was a litigator up until a year ago. I left the law on October 22nd, 2021. At that time, I had 368 connections, almost entirely in law. And I didn't really have any use for LinkedIn beyond it being my digital resume. Here I am almost a year later, and my network is much larger than 368 people. I've made friends on LinkedIn, legitimate friends, which is crazy to me. I've started projects with people. I've just the writing alone, just the fact that I've hit publish on a post 200 plus times this year is huge. I've also started businesses and found clients, since that was what really got me started on it, was taking a new role in business development in the nonprofit space and being advised by my buddy and now manager. Is he my manager? I don't know. But he told me, you need to learn how to do LinkedIn. I say, all right, I'll learn. And it's become such a nourishing and frankly fun place online. And I'm somebody who not only has not historically been a social media guy, I am one of those people who finds other platforms to be total cesspools and actually detrimental to my mental health and well-being. So the fact that LinkedIn is not only not that, but is actually a place where we can find nourishing connection online was a total surprise to me. Anyway, my conversation today. Matt Barker is a copywriter extraordinaire out of the UK. And Augusto Rozo is an entrepreneur who has lived all over the world. The man has quite a story, and he does a phenomenal job sharing his path from his childhood in Colombia to traveling to the US to spend a number of years there before moving to Europe, where he is now living with his family. And I wanted to have these two gentlemen on to talk about hypergrowth. And I want to make a couple quick points about these two gentlemen before we dive into the conversation. While they've both grown their networks tremendously, and I think they're both great examples for other creators on LinkedIn or people interested in gaining traction. Number one, it seems pretty clear talking to them that neither one of them designed their stuff to lead to hypergrowth. I don't think they set out to say, I'm going to get 15,000 people in my first 6 months or 9 months of posting out here. They were both consistent and they both have really strong presences, call it brand, call it reputation. And they're both excellent writers, which helps. The second point, they have taken very different routes there, where Matt tends to be uh, focused on the teaching of copywriting and sharing his own process for producing writing and producing or building a business. He shares a lot of detailed information about how he's going about his work. Um, while Augusto leans heavily into the personal. He's got a lot of selfies, a lot of pics with ice cream, a lot of stories about his family growing, where he grew up and he's moving around the world. So um, I had a great time with this conversation, and I hope you find it useful. And let's get on with it, shall we? All right, Matt, Augusto, welcome to the podcast. Thank you both for being up for doing this. And I'm interested to talk to you, gentlemen, as examples of what I think of as hyper growth on LinkedIn. So we're going to dig into that a little bit, as well as covering the ground of how LinkedIn has this like matrix-like quality of sort of opening up to be something totally different from what we thought it was before. And my guess is that basically those two topics are going to eat up all our time, but we'll find out. So let's start with just introduce yourselves. Who are you? Where are you calling in from? And what do you do?
Okay, well, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure because I love both of you. So very happy to say it out loud, not just as creators here, but in general as professionals and as friends, really. So it's a pleasure to have this conversation, and thank you for inviting us. Well, whenever they ask me that question, it's hard for me to give a short answer. So I'm a filmmaker by profession who never did filming, but then still kept being in love with stories and have used it throughout my life, working in all sorts of functions in different places around the world. I've worked in marketing, communications, procurement, supply chain, recruitment. And I guess it just speaks about my multiple interests. I define myself as a polymath, and it's no joke. That's why when we talk, we can talk about that, Tony, but when people talk here about niching down, I really have difficulties with that because that's not just me at all. And that's probably a weakness, but in a way it's been my strength, because then I work in business strategy and I use these multiple angles and interests and experiences to give some sort of holistic advisory to my clients, which is what I've been doing for the last year, because before I was working for corporate institutions in different roles for a decade in the Middle East. And before that, I was also an entrepreneur in Barcelona, which is where I lived for another 10 years. So you see, that's why it's a long answer to your question, but that's the shortest I can do.
That was short enough. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, so like Augusto said, thanks for having us on. My background is probably a little less complex than Augusto's, but yeah, I'd worked in marketing for 10 years in online retail and then B2B, so kind of phone accessories, stuff like that. And then last year, quit my job, went freelance, and just stumbled upon copywriting, and it kind of went from there. That's the story in a nutshell, really.
Fantastic. And so one of the dynamics here is that, so Augusto, you and I have had a few conversations. Augusto, you and Matt have had conversations, but Matt, this is the first time you and I are ever running across each other beyond the written word. So I definitely have some questions for you about that. And both of you kind of outlined specifically the contrast that I'm interested in, where you both, I pulled up your accounts at this point. So both of you started producing on LinkedIn pretty much this year consistently, right? And Augusto, you're at 14,679 followers. Matt, you are at 18,918. Both of those are crazy numbers. And it seems like the two of you did it in almost polar opposite ways, right? Where Augusto, you refused to niche down and you have like leaned into the personal stuff. And Matt, you have totally niched down. So I'm surprised to hear you say that you sort of fell into copywriting. That wasn't clearly the plan a year ago. If that wasn't then I definitely want to hear more about that. But as an entry point to LinkedIn, since I've got two groups of people in mind with this podcast. One are LinkedIn nerds, and the second are people who are thinking about getting more involved in conversations and starting to create or trying to gain traction. Maybe they've been creating for a little bit and haven't seen the kind of growth that they would like. So I want to hear from both of you what your experience was of when you joined LinkedIn. And my story is, I was in litigation for 11 years, and it was just my digital resume. Totally ignored the platform, never posted a single meaningful word on it. Saw no reason to. Right? And that was only when I got out of the law 11 months ago, and I was transitioning to a business development role, that I was basically told my job involved getting good at LinkedIn. All right, fine, I'll figure out LinkedIn. And I did Justin Welsh's operating system. And very quickly, the platform just opened up in a way that has been life-changing. I mean, there's no other way for me to put it. So I'm interested in one of the threads for just about everybody who's coming on this podcast is something along those lines, it seems, where LinkedIn was the world's most boring social media platform. And then somewhere along the way, it flipped. So if you gentlemen wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on that trajectory.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was the same. LinkedIn was extremely boring, and there's actually a text message that I put into one of our group chats with sort of 5 or 6 mates where, context, like I said, I left my job last September in London in marketing, left that to start moving to Cyprus. And in that process, I had no job, and then I managed to get a gig with one of my old employers writing product copy. They're a horticultural site. They sell plants and garden hardware online. So I was writing the product copy for that for about 3 months, and then January started posting on LinkedIn. And in January, there was a text in this group chat with me saying, "Is LinkedIn dead? Does anybody use it?" And that was probably about a week or two before I sort of decided to start posting, and I was reading up on the benefits of it and where people had got to. Yeah, and then it started just snowballing.
That's really wild. Augusto, how about you?
Well, yeah, I think it's all our stories are similar, but maybe the nuance in my case is that I was so when I moved to Sweden, I started to I pursued a master's degree again, like for the 4th time. So yeah, when you say nerds, that's me, LinkedIn nerds and nerds in general. But and while I was at it, I started to also wonder, what social media could work to kind of teach me, because I was diving into the world of sustainability and impact investing and other topics that were not really on Facebook or Instagram, which, by the way, were never my jam. So I don't have barely any presence there. Just maybe a few family and friends, like, yeah, but never really got into any of that. So being that sort of nerd, I was like, well, maybe this boring place is interesting for me, who I'm pretty boring. And so I kind of stumbled upon the fact that you could create content. I didn't even know, like, completely ignorant. So then again, Justin, well, similar stuff. Back in the day, we were trying to set up a new business, so I was also looking for a potential partner, business partner on two specific areas, tech and marketing, that could complete our team. And that was, I think, the initial intention, to try and connect with people who could potentially be part of our team. But then I had written, during the pandemic, I had started to write ideas and stories, really, because again, filmmaker who never did anything with that. So I was like, okay, maybe I can write. And so I said, well, I can share some content here too while I look for this business partner. And that's how I started in February, to post daily, some quotes, some, remember, Tony, we met very early on, some silly thoughts, or, just also some of the stories. But in general, very, I never got into the idea of teaching what I knew. Let's say that was not really my jam. It was more about inspiring or creating something a bit more, let's say, emotional, if you will. Because my life daily is very full of that other side of the technical stuff and that educational element. So I thought of exploring something entirely different to my everyday, which then became kind of my thing as it progressed. Because I think, again, to Matt's point, is you start testing different things, different formats, even topics, and then you discover what is it that not you like only, but also what people like you to talk about, right? So then it's a mixture of that influence from your audience, that I don't call it audience, but I call it community, but that's another topic. But I think it's a combination, right, of what do you like to write about, what do you see that people are interested in listening or reading, and that's how you eventually develop what, to your point, was that quick growth. Because it's like a magical moment where both your interests and what you kind of know how to do clicks with what others want to hear, and then you get more people interested.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think of LinkedIn as providing both community and audience, right? And I guess I think of I have a community on LinkedIn, but I think of it as a smaller group than like all the people who look at my stuff, if that makes sense. But Augusto,
Yes.
I want to share something with you from a text exchange you and I had in the DMs. This would have been on March 24th. And I share this because, when you're talking about, yeah, I know, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know where you're going, but yeah, go on.
When we're thinking about, like writing about what resonates with people, clearly both of you have figured it out. I mean, just you're absolutely killing it in terms of growth and in terms of engagement. That your communities, your audiences are really engaged in what you're doing. And I think for a lot of people, when it comes to LinkedIn in general and this idea of professionalism, like we feel like we need to know all the answers. And so you have to present yourself as somebody who is buttoned up and has their shit together, right? And maybe it feels less, it's not a place for experimentation or a place for testing things out. And Augusto, I think one of the reasons you and I get along so well is that we both have approached LinkedIn is precisely that. It's just a place for experimentation and
Oh, big
seeing
time.
what happens. And so this is from March 24th. You and I had just had our first conversation. You said, about to post my first LinkedIn pic. I'm nervous. I hate the spotlight. So this
Yeah.
is me getting out of my comfort zone big time. You say, it's out. Oh God.
Sure.
I studied filmmaking to be behind the camera, not in front of it. I have many contacts from my corporate life there. I'm not exposing myself constantly like on Facebook or Insta. I never post pics of mine. I have to become more comfortable with it, to be honest. And I offer that because you are now the king of the selfie. Right?
Yeah, that's a problem, right? When you get too comfortable, but that's the story of my life. Like I just throw myself out there and then I'm like, oh, this is actually nice.
Well,
Yeah.
that was almost exactly 6 months ago that you had never posted a photo of yourself, and you were very obviously uncomfortable with it. And I think
Yeah.
there's something.
Still am in a way. Like I don't like myself in pictures. And Matt has a lot to say about that, I think, too, because he doesn't like me either. But whenever he posts, he gets good engagement because we are all like, oh, there he is,
Well,
like the man behind the
yeah. So
awesome.
Matt has this, can I say cheeky as a Brit, right? Approach to the selfie game, while at the same time, I think Matt's also benefiting from the selfie game.
Well, who isn't? So, well, whoever is not sharing selfies. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's part of the discovery, and I think that again, we keep saying, how do we test new things here and how we present ourselves? I thought that for me to share part of that story that is genuine, right? Like when I was an entrepreneur, a very early entrepreneur when I was 22, and then all the things that I've put myself, to do, and not share who is behind that story. I felt it was like not it didn't really match, like it felt natural to say, look, this is me who has been talking about this, right? And then it's also a way to challenge a bit the back then now it's not anymore, but back then it was to challenge a bit the scroll, right? Like not everybody was sharing selfies, but also not all the selfies were linked to something that was, or at least aimed to be profound, because it might not look like, but every single story that I share is quite, like, I think it's quite deep, and it makes me put a lot of myself there. Like it's not something that I maybe sometimes it comes quickly, like I can write some stories in 10 minutes because that's how it is when it comes to writing your own thing, right? But what I'm saying is, it's like it's an exercise where you are really putting a lot of yourself there. So in a way, linking an image to that is like almost like a signature, like this is me who's saying that, right? As I cannot sign virtually. And so that's what made me think it makes sense. And that's why I also share it to even my mom or my daughters, right? Which is a tricky topic because you don't want to overexpose your family. That is obviously controversial. But that at the same time, we're thinking that professionalism is about being a single person wherever you are. Well, this is me wherever I am, right? Like, and even in my previous job, or whether I'm wearing a t-shirt or a tie, both of which feel very comfortable for me, to be honest. This is me. This is my family. These are my thoughts, the things that I stand by in any situation. So why not? If it was not genuine, if it was a pose, then I wouldn't be comfortable. But this is something that I can stand by regardless of the moment or the place where I am. And that is why I have gotten more comfortable.
Right on. Yeah. A LinkedIn philosopher. I love it. All right. So Matt, juxtaposing that with your approach. So I think of Augusto as somebody who has grown through, and we can dig into kind of how it's happened a little bit for him. I have some thoughts and have watched it very closely. Um, but mainly it's around Augusto. It's, as he's saying, it's his life. He is the embodiment of personal brand, right? That we go to look at his stuff simply because it's Augusto, even though he may be talking about ice cream or his mother or you know, tooling across Sweden or living in Dubai, right? You, on the flip side, uh, you've been really targeted in turn, you know, in being helpful to people as a copywriter, right? And helping people do that. So how do you, and so that's part of why I'm surprised to hear that a year ago you did not have this plan of even working as a copywriter, much less being on your way to being LinkedIn famous. So how did you land on kind of what you write about and that very clear niche you have that's resonating with so many people?
It kind of started from, you know, going back to the kind of type of selfies that I post. I I take them taking the piss with shit sunglasses on, usually in an airport when I'm flying somewhere or in a random shop, just because one, I hate taking selfies, and two, it's just funny. And it kind of, in the process, I can kind of take the piss out of personal branders, which
Mm-hmm.
is sort of my competition. I hate competition, but like they're sort of my competition, and they're kind of the complete opposite to everything I do as a writer and uh, as a ghostwriter as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, early on, it was those personal branders and people like Justin Welsh who I'd kind of follow and realize, and they'd kind of say how you need to, you know, educate people. Your post shouldn't be about you. It should all be about helping someone else. So after kind of like a few weeks or a couple of months, just pissing around, posting stuff which I thought people would be interested in, I sort of started going down that route. And as I was working more and doing more things, and learning more about copywriting, I had more to share. So,
So
yeah.
when was the point where, or so like January when you started posting, where were you at in terms of your network?
I think I had like 700 connections, which was just from career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was just that, and it was completely dormant. I think I'd posted. I think the only post I'd done prior to that within the last like five, however many years, was in September when I left my previous job and posted saying, "I've just left my job. Does anybody need any copywriting?" Because I'd written like shoddy copy on like emails and stuff like that before, and after and in September I started writing NFL fantasy blogs for a guy I met on Twitter, because I'm really into NFL, and I'm really into NFL fantasy. So I just like, oh, okay,
Okay.
I'll try this out.
When you said fantasy, I was thinking like Lord of the Rings, but you're saying
No,
fantasy
no,
football. Okay, gotcha.
fantasy football, yeah, yeah. No, I'm actually not a big Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter kind of fan. So
Right on. So when was it that you started to grow the way you have then? I mean, did it happen right off the bat? Let me do a little bit more context setting. Is so I think that a small part of why the two of you have managed to do what you've done is that you're playing in some pretty big pools in the LinkedIn space, which is Augusto, you kind of in the entrepreneurship space and in the copywriting space, Matt. Like those are two spaces that have a lot of active people in them, right? On LinkedIn. So it seems like it's, if you're using those hashtags and getting into those topics, there are just more people to look at your stuff who are looking for that kind of stuff. That said, there are also more people who are presumably trying to do what you've done, right? In terms of gaining traction and building a sizable following. So Matt Barker, what is your secret? How's that? Huh? Me doing my best podcaster.
yeah, nice, good soundbite. It took me. I think I posted just kind of random junk for about a month or two, kind of slowly learning, and my writing process was wake up in the morning, post write a post in the LinkedIn app and then just send it that morning. And that soon became very stressful for me. So then after a few weeks, I started scheduling posts and stuff like that. And I was very consistent with my posting, but I still wasn't really getting any leads for my business, which was the main reason I was on LinkedIn. And I wasn't really growing much at all. I was kind of growing enough just because I was kind of there posting. I think in like my first 12 posts, I got like no likes, no comments, just nothing, absolutely nothing for like a good 2-3 weeks. And then, yeah, I think after a few weeks, I kind of started finding my voice a little bit and kind of was like, I'd been following all these personal branders and I'd kind of been trying to be like them. And I'm just so not that at all. So it was really hard to write like that, obviously. So yeah, after a few weeks, I sort of started cutting the way I was writing down and keeping it a bit more kind of to the point, which is what I'm like. And that went on for about another month. And then it was only after about 2 months where I actually started like commenting, talking to people and actually like engaging, because before then I genuinely just I was just like la post to see if this does anything. I had no idea of the whole kind of concept of like, if I engage with you and I show up on your posts and I'm like in front of your face like every day, you're going to be like, oh, who's this guy? And then it's going to build a relationship and then you're going to get engagement back. And that whole kind of community cycle started to click. So that was a big point. And then after that was really when I started turning the screw on my content and making that a lot better, which, Augusto, close your ears, was after I'd done the Justin Welsh course. And yeah, that kind of opened my eyes with how you kind of repurpose and produce good content for LinkedIn and that sort of thing.
Right on. There is definitely a clarity to your writing and your messaging, right? That I think anybody who's leveraging LinkedIn effectively has, right? You have a sense of, if not you have some sense of what somebody's about, right? Like who they are, what they care about, and what they do for the most part. Although arguably I'm somebody who's out here and people have very little idea what it is I do, which is oddly sort of by design, but it's well,
if I was to say there was a secret, it would be like two things. It would be just writing very clearly. So like just the whole clear over clever. So just be understood minimum. At least people can read it. Even if what you're writing is really boring, at least people can read it. That's like number one. And then number two, it was understanding the problems and experiences that your target audience are actually experiencing. So like actually talking to people and understanding that. So I figured out sort of after a few weeks and 2 or 3 months that I should start writing for like my struggles that I experienced about 3 months ago, not knowing what I was doing. And as I was learning, you can kind of teach that kind of 1 or 2 steps back, which gives you a lot of clarity over what to write.
But I think Matt is not mentioning something that I think has been key in his growth, and also I think to a certain extent in mine, is how incredibly disciplined he has been. Because people here talk about consistency all the time, right? And it's almost a cliche. But if somebody embodies that consistency, it has been Matt. And it's very interesting because not only he has showed up every day once, but twice. And that also accelerates the growth. But then, yes, you can post twice and not offer value or not offer something new. And then it hinders, it affects your growth. But in Matt's case, and we've talked about it quite a few times, right? Not only has he been consistently showing up every day, but for an important period twice a day and offering value twice, or at least generating a good conversation, because at 1 p.m. he opens up a joke or something. That's when we see his selfies, and it's never in the 9 a.m. So that is remarkable, because having that discipline, and that's why he mentions the system. You see how he goes when he explains his story, he goes to the system when he was random. Like, he developed a system. Not that I'm right now I have no system, so that's why, and this is why this is all fascinating, because I didn't follow the templates. I didn't have I don't have Shield. Sorry guys, never had it. Right. And so all of these things that might work most times, and that maybe are not necessarily my story, he represents how those actually work. And I really admire that. And we've talked about it. And he says, like, I need to know that it's going at this time and at this time. Like, he has developed a system. And that's why when he shares those insights on how he has done it, people can I've learned from him, right? Even if it's to say, well, I cannot do that, but at least I know it, right? So I think that he underestimates the power of that discipline, because I also experienced it to a certain extent when I was posting twice a day, which was for like 6 weeks or so. And I felt my growth was also accelerating. And for example, for the last month or so, or that I have been posting less because of other life matters that I am dealing with. And because I like him and like you all, we like to respond to every comment and to engage into conversations, right? Like, there's no point in just, sending something and not even looking at them, even to acknowledge what people comment or something. I immediately experienced less growth, because every post that you throw out there, it's an opportunity for people to discover you. So I think that is both the quantity and the quality that matters. So you have to have that combination to accelerate it. I think that another interesting fact is that in both our cases, at least until very recently, neither Matt or I have had like a huge viral post that went to 10,000 likes or something like that. We never did. I have never had that. And I think the farthest I went was maybe 1,800, or like, I never had that viral post that can bring you, I don't know, 5,000 followers in a night or something. Like, no. And that also has been key, I think, in both our cases, because we have built these like almost person by person, almost post by post. Yes, in some cases, I got a few posts that went to 800, 1,000, like a few of them. But that is just like in the community that you're building. And that's why I have had very, how that you're not really going viral. I have gotten very few, not to say like maybe one hater, and I made a post about it because it was so new. And why is that? Because I'm not really going out of my first and second grade connections. When you get out there, and I've seen that through other experiences very close, like people start to say, oh, and comment on your hat, on your hair, on your, like, we have friends here who have experienced that. And I have not seen that side of LinkedIn, because we've grown that very organically. And that is very interesting, because that also has to do with your engagement. Why have both Matt and I experienced not only growth, steady growth, but also like steady engagement and positive engagement? Because the community is alive, and they see that we're giving back, or that we're engaging. And I think that has been key in both of our cases, right? And obviously you've seen cases of people who, for example, very early in their journey, they have a post that goes viral, and I've seen somebody, for example, getting 10,000 followers out of one post, or 8,000 or something like that. But then to keep up to that and to keep the engagement is very difficult. And it's almost, it's like a curse in a way. I think that it's much better to build that. And then if something comes like a viral post, I think that Matt has a recent couple of cases. I think now he has capitalized that baseline that was very strong. And so that's perfect, because now he has that baseline and that community and that knowledge that he's giving. And so that's why I think Matt's case is almost like a by the book case for how to do LinkedIn, not mine. Like, don't look at me. nothing to replicate. But I think Matt's is, you mean what I mean? Like mine is a bit more out there, but I really respect how he has done it, because it's exactly how anyone who wants to do LinkedIn should probably go about this.
I think, sorry, if I could just buy in, it's, you say that, and it's interesting because we are two polar opposite ways to do it. And I saw something someone said recently that, like, you know, people like you, Augusto, and people like Luke Matthews, big, strong personalities. If you have that, I think I don't. You don't need to do what I do. You don't need to have these scheduling things. You don't need to have system analytics. Like, I'm being serious. Like, I don't have the personality to be like out there and like like makes a massive impact as soon as you see me, and like I'm charismatic when you talk to me. Like, I'm just not that person. So for me, I have to go down that other route. And you know, you obviously talk about you found success not doing it the systems way and being thingy. And Luke is exactly the same, although he's coming around to it now after conversations we've had.
Of course.
But I think there's a thing somewhere that if you do just have a personality that people are naturally attracted to, then you will see that growth, regardless of how consistent you are or anything like that.
Yeah, but I agree with your view, and that's why when I started my previous comment, I said, like, you and I have different styles, but we have things in common, and that discipline of showing up every day, right? Like, we have had it, and you, Tony, you have to, and we have been systematic about that. And me too. Like, I have not failed for almost 7 months a single day, right? And sometimes twice, even if I had nothing spectacular to say, but I would still come and do it, and that is important. Also, being devoted to the people that respond to you. Like, I read every single comment, no matter how late it is. I will go and read it. And many times, most of the times, respond to them. And I've seen Matt doing that. And Tony, you do it too. Well, and your comments are out of this world. So it's hard to respond to your comment, because your comment is like a post, right? So that's a separate topic, Tony. That's like, you're one of my favorite commenters. But you see, so that is what you build, and what I think the three of us have been doing, which is crucial here, regardless of your style, your personality, your selfies, or whatever. People see that, and that you're really committed to giving in a way or another, and they value that, and that's when they respond and they engage. And the best example of this is Taslim, our friend, who is like LinkedIn's Robin Hood. And so whenever you see his post, you just want to like it, like you just want to comment on it. Whether you necessarily agree or not with what he says, that's a different topic, but you will find a way to just respond to it, because that is what people in different ways or with different personalities create. And that is what we're talking about here. How can you go and use LinkedIn beyond your CV, your profession, your experience, and create that person that people can relate to, that can be inspired by, that can learn from, right? Like, that is what we're doing, all of us, in different ways. And to your point, Matt, each person has his own or her own way to do it. And as long as it feels right, you know, I for example, have what is easy for you, Matt, when it comes to, you know, sharing with people what to do. That requires a lot of certainty. Like, you need to be very, you know, it's, you know, how you see that I might be like just with a very strong personality that everybody will just, I feel that doing what you do is, for me, is more difficult. Like, I wouldn't know how to put it in a 10 list, like, just do these steps and you'll be good. I'm like, I need all the context to give. That's why I am an advisor for specific people, because how can I create a list that works for everybody? And that requires a level of self assurance that, at least when you publish here, that I don't have. And you see, so it's interesting, because I think this is a very long answer, right, to your question. We're not letting you even talk, Tony. Sorry, but it's a very interesting conversation, because it's a way to verify that we all, if we know how to use our own strengths and our own skill set, right, whether it is to write lists or not. Like, for me, to write lists feels unnatural. Like, it feels like almost wow, this is I for me it's much easier to talk about what a certain story that I learned today has made me a better person or a better businessman because of that. And right, so I think we're playing here somehow to our strengths, and I think that that is the secret, if you will. If you know how to connect that with your content and how you act with people, then you have something that is valuable for, I guess, everyone interacting there.
Mm. I do want to dig into one thing you said there, Augusto, around comments. Is I, the way I've come to think about creating on LinkedIn, my posts really, to a large degree, are just attempts to get to the comment section as quickly as I can. Matt, you said earlier about cutting out words and trying to get to the point. I try to write that way as well, to try to keep it simple. Don't use it. Don't use 10 words when 4 will work, right? And my goal is to get people into my comment sections ASAP, right? Is uh, first and foremost, that's the most fun for me, is those back and forths, and that's what leads to relationships, right? That's what leads to great conversations. Is that, or how do you think about that? Augusto said that you're somebody who also spends a lot of time in your comment sections. Is that true?
Yeah, it is, and up until probably only a month or two ago, but probably a month ago, and which was when the the growth started accelerating quicker than it had been before. I would like and reply to every single comment. Yeah. Now I try and make sure I'm there for the first like 20 minutes, half an hour of when a post goes out, do my best there, and then I'll revisit it the next day and try to get back to as much as I can. But now for me, as my business has grown, I've got less time for LinkedIn, so naturally I'm trying to be a bit more strategic with how I do it.
Yeah.
Still kind of keep that community aspect alive.
Yeah. So it's a good point. I want to say that 2 months ago, even, you were at more like 6,000. I mean, is that
No,
right? That you
not
broke
2 months ago,
10,000
no.
in the last like 2 months? Is that, am I like, I haven't watched you that closely, but all of a sudden I was like, where the hell did this guy come from? What's happening?
No, not that, no 6,000 2 months ago,
No,
Matt. No,
I
no.
think I think 2 months ago I was probably at about 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably sounds a bit closer to where I was at. But yeah, it's in September month, I've gone up by about 4 or 5,000. I think it's
Correct.
been mad.
And that is what we were talking about, because he has had also, he mentioned that like a couple of viral posts, and that are the result of that work. Because if you look at his posts that went viral, it's him. It's the things that he has been taught. It's not like well, maybe the story was a bit unusual, and that is clearly a very, unique. But the listicle, right? That list that you created, that is very mad, and that is what is remarkable, because he went viral with something that is not, emotional or.
What was it?
It was a list. What was it of Twitter?
The first one was just basically my process of how I get ideas for posts. So I go onto Twitter, I copy the link, embed it into Notion, and then I've got a big swipe file of posts that I can reference to for ideas when I'm writing my content and for clients. And it was just that simple headline, a list, and then a screenshot of the people that I've got, pages that I've got. To be fair, fortunate enough to have Justin Welsh hop on and comment, so I think that just sent it off, and that is just how it goes. If someone with like 200,000 followers is going to interact with you, but yeah, the second one was just my story, which I've kind of touched on at the start, and just with a picture, and yeah, I didn't really think much of that, but it just went nuts.
That's really interesting. And what comes to mind there is, so that first one, I mean, Justin's interacted with a couple of my posts. He's been gracious enough to do that. And so it's no guarantee that you're then going to go to,
Right. It has to be value, and right.
well,
You're right. It's
yeah,
true.
but an interesting thought there is that Matt, well, I would think both of those speak to a point that I think is really valuable, which is you never know how a particular post is going to behave. Is my
Yeah.
guess is that when you put out your listicle of this is how I generate ideas, you're not saying, oh, this is a grand
This
slam.
is the
Like,
one,
this is going to
right?
kill it.
No.
To be honest, it's really similar to how the whole Justin Welsh thing is. And I was like, I'm just gonna post it because it's kind of slightly different and it's kind of like a lazy way of explaining it. It doesn't really actually it doesn't really actually say like, here you go, do this. It's like this is how you can look at things, which is just weird. But yeah, I didn't expect that to go that nuts. And yeah, and that's that, but it's also on that kind of subject of like showing people how you do something, which
Mm.
like millions of people do. But you just never know how your way of doing it is going to be interpreted. And just this morning, I posted something similar and kind of how I find relevant followers to people to connect with, like people who are connected with similar people to me, like other ghostwriters, and that's done pretty well as well. So I think there's kind of power in that whole sharing your process thing.
Especially because again, his audience, let's use the marketing word, um, is looking for that. That is what he has been talking about. So when you offer that value, you say, well, I've learned something new, right? So then that's what I was saying. Like Matt, if you go through Matt's posts day by day, you know how to write on LinkedIn. You don't need to pay for anything. That's just, he has shared every bit of it. So if you give something valuable to these people who are following every day to see, oh, how he does it, and I want to learn, then of course, like, man, thank you. Like, you want to hug that person. Right? It's amazing. And then if it's done beautifully and nicely written and right, then what's not to like? Like it's really amazing. It seems simple, it isn't, but I think that is a learning for people to who are comfortable and who want to share and to educate. I think that what Matt is mainly doing here is educating people on how to write and how to write up for LinkedIn. This is what he is doing. He gives us some emotions once every 2 months, but that's it. Like the rest is mainly educating and giving away. So two foundations. If you are giving before, right? Like you're giving and in return, you get this engagement, you get the leads, right? It's a very nice process where everybody kind of wins. But you need to be able to give in a way that is compelling, that is actionable, right? That's again, seems easy, it isn't. But I think that explains why also we interacted at the beginning, because I find his writing very, very easy, but also his personality so opposite to mine, very attractive, right? Because he's everything I am not. But that is why I was like, I like that guy, right? and we were introduced by Luke, and then we kind of developed that friendship, and seeing our growth like in parallel, very similar, at least until very recently when I took a bit of a step back, and now Matt is going even faster. But that has been amazing because I've learned from him every day, and to build these type of relations. And I know, Tony, that is what you do here, is I think the most I don't know, unexpected but also most valuable thing that you get from here, right? It's not, yeah, the business, of course we're here to make business, but certainly to build this type of relations is something that I was not expecting to get from here.
One point I want to highlight from what you were just saying, Augusto, is part of why Matt's content works so well is that educational piece. And I think there's some nuance there that's useful, I think, particularly for people who are trying to find their voice, trying to figure out how to do this thing effectively, which is a lot of, so Matt showing like, I know what I'm talking about, which can help generate leads. But the way the stuff really spreads is he's not necessarily talking directly to his potential clients for ghostwriters. He's talking to people, as you said, Matt, somebody 3 months behind you who's trying to figure it out. And then it's those people who do a lot of the engaging and help the thing move. And then by helping the thing move, the people who
discover you,
hire Matt are, number one, more likely to see it. And number two, by virtue of the engagement, there is a level of built-in credibility already that can help somebody who's trying to decide, do I need a ghostwriter? And if so, who? Say, this guy looks like a pretty good option.
Yeah, correct. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating process if you think about it from a marketing perspective and how the relations work, and right, like it's really fascinating. Like I've gotten leads from the most random posts that you would have never, that portray me almost as bad as my job, you know, eating that post with, you know, with the patacon with my mom, like 1,000 likes or something. And I got a lead that converted from that post. Because to your point, they are not hiring you based on that specific post. Then they go and check your, obviously, what you offer, right, and then your profile and your experience, and then they want to hop on a call, and then they see that you can be of help. Then they hire you, but they discovered you maybe through a post that was something random. I'm not saying that then you can just post random stuff. Of course, there's a strategy behind it, and then you have a certain theme, and then you have a community that supports that. But what I'm saying, again, as you were saying earlier, is first of all, you don't know what post is going to be that one, and second, that those posts, if they converged with your persona in a way or another, whether they are a bit more structured or maybe a bit funny, like the ones that Matt posts on his second round every day, they can still be as meaningful and productive as the ones where he's a bit more, you know, technical and serious, if you will.
Yeah, that's spot on. Did want to touch on this, how you think about from your vantage points now, where you've gained traction, you've achieved this level of growth. The challenges you're facing as creators are very different than the challenges you were facing 9 months ago, when it's like, how do I get somebody to actually read this, right? And now the problem is, what do I do with the tidal wave of attention, right? Like I'm at, you know, I broke 4,000 recently, and I'm already finding serious challenges in still, Augusto, to your point, engaging with everything, you know, like being as active.
Yeah, because you also want to visit other people's posts.
Yeah,
and that is the challenge when you grow. How can you spend the time that you used to spend in other people's shop in your own?
Yeah,
that is tricky.
Because it's not like my community, like, you know, Augusto, you're from my sort of original dozen people who I think of as like really in my crew as I started gaining traction. But now I've added like another 100, you know, and in a way that it does not scale. It really doesn't. You have to change. And
that's why, for example, if you think about it, you and I have been texting less. Why? Because you've gotten busier and I've gotten busier, right? And now, so, and even with Matt, we had an idea of doing something together, and we haven't had the chance, because not only the community has grown, but also then as a result of that, there is more work actually out on LinkedIn, right? So, you know, those are the challenges. And again, if we have this conversation a year later, which we should probably do, we'll see how we went through that. Because I think, to start to answer your question, one of the challenges that we will all have is how to keep the momentum around what has worked. Because at what point does it get repetitive? At what point does it get, you know, if it isn't already, like, at least in my case, and that is a creative challenge, because we're used to novelty, right? And it's interesting because I've seen, and I'm not going to say any names, obviously, but I know for a fact, because see, I have a problem. People say you can repurpose your content and nobody will remember. Well, I am the exception to that rule. If somebody repurposes and I am following them, oh, trust me, I know. Like, and you might too. And well, I don't know. They say nobody remembers. Sorry, I remember. So I saw these posts actually yesterday of somebody that I follow, that I admire and respect, and they, let's say, used these posts that they had used that had gone massively viral, and it had 200 reactions. And I was surprised because to a certain extent, you learn that if something works, it works, and you can just repurpose it and repurpose it. And I think that's true maybe for a couple of times, but then the third one, no, it did, and it's fascinating because that is a challenge for all of us, and it's how are you going to keep the momentum a year later, 2 years later, and that's why people like, I don't know, Luke Matthews or Claire Parsons, people who have been doing this even before we started here, like 3 years ago, and they still have something to say and still are growing these communities. This is people that I highly respect. Not to say that we aren't, but we're still newbies. Like, we haven't even completed a year here, you know? So, I mean, I have really nothing to teach, which is why I'm so precious about, no, I'm not, I don't want to teach, because if anything, I'm here just to share. If you like it, okay, great. But if not, then I'm here to learn. Because I think that is what will come ahead, especially as you get also, as you get more leads, and because you see all the big accounts, they also go through that challenge of being repetitive.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Matt, if you have any thoughts on that, or.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Luke and Claire, and then on the flip side, you have the likes of Dickie Bush and Justin Welsh and the big guys, the big people, who I think, you know, they grew, and now they've got fully functioning businesses which are big and scaling, and they have processes, and it's a full business. And now LinkedIn is just a marketing channel. It's not the community that it was when they started. It evolves into a marketing channel, because obviously, like we've seen with Justin Welsh, this in the last few months, he's just flipped over to Twitter, and now he's doing exactly the same thing. So that's another. So now that's where if you comment on one of his posts on Twitter, he's back at you instantly. He replies to all the comments, because that's where you need to pull your attention, because you need to grow your community, and then from there it becomes the big marketing channel that you want it to be. So that, I think that's the two flip sides. But yeah, I mean, Luke is a weird exception, but then he does just come out with his like I said earlier, it's personality, and he puts that on show, and he kind of uses LinkedIn as a way to kind of breathe and like relieve, like it's almost kind of relieving for him, it feels like at times, to just sit and write and bash out whatever's on his mind. And in terms of kind of repurposing, yeah, it links back to what I just said, but I don't hate it, because I see it from a marketing standpoint, and I've repurposed some posts. I wouldn't tend to try to copy it word for word. I'll look at it, see how I can do it better, and then repost it. But
yeah, and I by the way, I don't have anything against repurposing. I've repurposed posts myself, but I'm just saying that what we've learned is that if you know that post worked well, it might work well again the second time, but at some point it won't. It's not that then you just got it right and then it's going to work for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's not just
yeah. I have nothing against repurposing. I'm just saying that if I remember, some other people will, and that's why I was surprised to see a post that is an excellent post. It's an excellent post that I have liked, and I have seen you like, I've seen you commented, and now it's out again, and it really went very flat. So it was surprising, but again, I'm not surprising, because we all know that everything has a shelf life at the end, everybody and everything. So how to keep yourself innovating, and if you want to keep using it as a creative outlet, if it's a marketing, but even if as a marketing channel, at some point it will exhaust, because people will notice then, like, this is just more of the same stuff, right? And we have seen that with some of the examples you mentioned. So I think that is a challenge that we will all face, and that we all face as we evolve, and if we stay for long enough to experience that, because that's the other challenge. Like, will we be all here in a year from now? That's a big first question that probably we need to answer. Hopefully, yes.
On LinkedIn, yeah, not
on
dead.
LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, well, I talk about that all the time, so so that's probably my again philosophical question coming there. But yeah, I was talking about LinkedIn.
A couple things that come up here. One, to that point about the repurpose thing that falls flat. To me, that's mainly a thing, a note about how the algo is unpredictable. That you can't know what the algorithm has been doing. And we've been seeing something recently, and I don't know if you gentlemen have, where it looks like views are starting to be down, but the engagement numbers aren't necessarily. So it seems like the algo has changed in some way. But yeah, and also I'm finding my two biggest posts from the last month are both videos talking about LinkedIn. And that seems like, whereas videos 6 months ago, and I mean, I was much smaller then, but they weren't going anywhere. But it looks like that's a real thing. So Matt, you might need to start, and Augusto, in front of that camera. But so that's one thing, is that just the algo.
I would see Matt doing that.
I would think that there would be a way that a post can go viral one day, but if you were to post it 3 days later, it could behave totally differently. Like it's just not about the thing itself. And then the other point I wanted to touch on is this idea that I talk to people about finding your corner of the internet to preach from. That if you find your corner and you just start doing your thing, and you show up every day like you're talking about, or even twice a day, you're going to find your voice. You're going to find what you care about talking about. You're going to find what resonates with people, and you can lean into that. Like over time, to your point, Matt, like what Luke's doing and kind of what you do, that teaching, we're always on the path in a way that we're always, no matter where I am today, if I know what my corner is, then I know what I'm looking forward at. And I also know what I just learned. Right. And so it's a hard idea to internalize. I think it took me years. I mean, I've been blogging and talking in public about creativity and creative process since 2016. And it's only been this year that all of a sudden there's attention, that there's a lot of engagement and ways for me to get real-time feedback that can inform what I keep doing. And I think that's the key, that like finding that corner and then just having that point of view, all of a sudden the world starts being distilled through the lens of somebody who writes in public, who shares in public what they're learning. And to me, that's the crux of what you both do. That's really key to, I mean, I'm not saying it's key to like blowing up, but it's just to finding the people who can form the foundation of that community you're talking about, Augusto, where you start to collect more attention and make those connections, have those conversations that can be so life-changing.
Yeah, I agree with that, and maybe it's a good way to wrap it up. But from my perspective, what that corner has allowed me to understand is that I can write, first of all, which I didn't know, sort of like that I can write stories. That is my thing, really. When it comes to writing, like I educate as part of my daily life, right? I said it at the beginning. So I like to explore something entirely different. That I have things that other people are interested in listening and reading, and that my own life reflections and business reflections are not only mine, that a few people share those questions. So I think the idea here is, okay, well, you found a space, and or I found a space that kind of this helped me discover things that I didn't entirely know about myself, and now I know, and that is why I've leaned towards that I will publish at some point all this that I have in my head, right? And that is why I'm not talking anymore about other things that, yes, I could talk about, but this space for me, that corner, is that space where I want to explore my journey as a stories author, you know. And to find that that people resonated with that was something new, because that I could be a consultant for businesses, and that is what has been my life, or that I could do my job in other professional aspects. So I know that, but this I didn't know, and that's why I'm like so attached to it. It's almost like a personal like thing where I say that if they tell me to do this, I will do exactly the opposite, because that is the only space where I can actually do it, right? Thankfully, I don't need this in my case, for example, to bring leads. And so that is like it's an advantage to me, because it gives me the liberty of not thinking too much about whether people will like it or not, you know. But I think that conclusion is, if anybody can, because you were saying this is more, or this space is to help people maybe think about doing it, right? So I would invite anyone who wants to explore that, what this could be for them, like regardless of the fact that this will bring you business, and it will likely do, and it has been a surprise for me. And the fact is that it can be also a personal discovery about skills that you didn't know you had, right? Like I am writing in a language that is not even my first language, if you think about it, right? So and to see that people can relate and say, oh, this is so poignant, or this is, you have made me cry, or whatever, things like that, that is like, man, like this is not even my language, like thank you, like I feel thankful. I really, when I thank people saying that, is I mean it. Like I could not imagine that I could do that. And that, so if anything, I want to thank everybody here, because that has made me think that I can write, that I can publish, and there will be someone else out there wanting to read that.
It's really well said. That seems like a really good note to end on. It's okay. So we're about at time. To dismount, obviously in the show notes, I'm going to be including the links to both of your profiles. Are there any other things you would like to point people's attention to? The answer to that could be no.
I hate a plug and a sale, but I've got a digital product, content framework matrix. It will help you write your posts in a structured way. That's all I'll say.
Sold the hell out of that one. Perfect.
I'm closed for business. So Augusto is not taking any clients.
All right.
Yeah. No, seriously. No, but I'm not close to friendships. Yeah. I mean, I said it at the beginning, and it's not no joke. Like I've told Matt like that I love him, and I really do. Like this is why when you said like Tony, who he's like I look up to him so much, and I love this conversation, and I hope we can have it a year later to see where we are then. But from my perspective, Tony, what you're doing, trying to figure out what's happening here, and through people that have gone through that, is very interesting, because that is where the real growth, the real learnings happen, right? Like we have figured out many of these things ourselves just by posting every day, right? So from my perspective, nothing to add. Just to thank you for this.
I appreciate that. And part of the motivation for starting this podcast is number one, the thing with growth, where those things 9 months ago, where if somebody was like, hey, you want to hop on Zoom? Somebody wants to, yeah, let's do it. Let's have a chat. And now it's really hard to schedule that stuff. So this is a way to get those calls on my calendar. But then, yeah, there's also I had a hunch that the conversations would be really rich, and the triangulating voices, that so it's not me asking Matt, my list of questions. It's, like it's where the two of you roll for 20 minutes and I don't say anything. That's precisely what I'm gunning for. So this has been, I think, really educational and a lot of fun. So I really appreciate both you guys. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Matt and Augusto. I hope you found it worthwhile. If you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and even a review on your podcast app of choice, we would be much obliged. I should mention I have a book out there, In the Creative Arena, is available on Amazon, and also check out the show notes. We've got mentions of everybody Matt, Augusto, and I talked about during today's episode. We've also got a few links to other goodies, including Justin Welsh's course, which has influenced us, and then also the links to Augusto and Matt's profiles, where you can find Matt's offerings. You can get one-on-one time with him, or his template framework, which is affordable. And I haven't seen it, but I would do it. And I think maybe you would too. All right. Till next time, folks. Should I call you Linkies? Are you Linkies? Anyway, till next time. I'll see you in Linky Land.